All right, we'll go ahead and get started here today. My name's Arie van der Hoeven, and we have an all-Dutch squad today because Manuel Offenberg is also here as our managing technologist. And really what we're going to do is talk about storage security and in a broader view about device security. And something I want to say is that we're just very happy to be part of the OCP effort. We see, or at least I see, a need for those of us who are device vendors to get more involved and more engaged, and that'll be a common theme here today. So thank you, Manuel, for showing up. You weren't initially on the schedule, and we also only have about 20-25 minutes to talk. And I've been in. I think this week we had a conversation about platform configuration registers that lasted an hour for devices. So this isn't going to be a super in-depth talk. It's going to be much more of an overview with a storage perspective, but also a device perspective. So an interesting thing happened is, we were a little bit late to come. We wanted to tell a security story around storage. And I should also caveat that by saying that there's no Seagate secret sauce here. We're with Seagate, but we know that every storage vendor has to abide by the same standards, deal with the same agencies, deal with the same enterprises and CSPs that we do. So don't take this as us marketing Seagate products. It's more about us representing the storage industry. We looked at the OCP charter. And this was kind of like the argument I had to get to tell this talk. We looked at their charter and what we're presenting to our internal customers and found that we're fairly aligned. System boot code integrity, making sure that anything you boot is trusted. That's certainly a big theme for us as well. So we have trusted firmware from a known source. It's audited by third parties who are accredited by the NIST, for example. And that goes with every product, I believe. And Manuel, step in and correct me if I say anything wrong. Okay, please. There is a move towards open sourced firmware. We'd love to look at that. That's a great conversation. That's another one of these probably 7-hour conversations. But we certainly participate in all standards-based practices. Again, back to the OCP charter, security firmware APIs and protocols. Certainly we know, and every device knows, that we have to comply with the root of trust that's coming from the system that we're booting on. Whether that be a TPM or Cerberus or Cerberus or some other device, and that our devices have to be attested to. And we do that internally on our own, but we also realize the system needs to do that as well. Secure boot, there's earlier in my career I worked on this on the OS side, but secure boot is there's a OS-based secure boot. Largely UEFI-based, but also progressing. And we do something very similar on the device side. And we're very happy to talk to anyone about what we're doing there. Compromised or untrusted state recovery is something that's come up. And that's another one of these things that we'll debate, but we're open to debating. And that is, we don't want to have a device that suddenly creates a DDoS scenario where you can trick the system to thinking the device is untrusted when it really isn't. Long discussion there. We won't have that today. Making sure that any storage you can write to is trusted. And this is vitally important, and that is making sure that any firmware update is done in a secure manner that's supported by PKI, public key infrastructure principles. That's done, I know it's done at the system level, it's also done at the device level by us. So any update to our firmware has to be signed by a private key from Seagate and trusted. And to us, that's both a security issue, but it's also, as you can imagine, something that we don't want to have like some security researcher write a paper and say, oh, I was able to update a drive's firmware, because that's just the ultimate backdoor. We have to have trust throughout the system. And I realize I'm talking about just a small part of the full security story, but that's what that's what we're presenting today, and that's why this is a short talk, not a long talk. So let's look at what we're dealing with here, and that is, if you look at the drug cartels throughout the world and the revenue they're generating, it's huge. If you look at cybersecurity threats and the revenue they're generating, it's out here. We're really up against people with very infinite resources. They have a great system of communicating with each other, selling, trading, even just bragging about information. And that puts us, basically I'm looking at some of the people in the room here, and you are the thin blue line. That puts us at us and our industry and the trust our customers put in us in peril, just because of the resources that the black hats have. And with that, and I already started to talk about this a little bit, but collaboration and transparency. And that's where I love this OCP effort, where we make sure that we're, when you're in a security forum, whether it be UEFI or TCG or anything, rivals become best friends. And we have to be. We have to cooperate, we have to collaborate as an industry, and I see OCP as another step in that direction. So I love the fact that we're moving towards this collaborative process. We, and myself actually, was a little bit late to engage with OCP, but as soon as we started talking, we're all talking the same language, basically. And we must take this approach where we share information. They're sharing information. We can't assume that they don't know what we know. And that's what makes this so hard sometimes. So that's just a very strong statement I want to make. If there's one statement I had to make today that you want to carry home, this would be it. Let's collaborate, let's work together, let's realize the scale of the folks who want to get your data, which is probably by now close to $1 trillion data trove of access to cyber criminals, and much, much more when you look at the overall impact and cost to the industry. So thank you all just for being in the security field and for participating. So this is one of our more traditional Seagate slides where we look at the transition to data security. We really think that by 2025, all data should be protected, and we really feel that encryption, especially SED, is the path towards that. If you look at a typical breach for an enterprise, it's $7.9 million, which is a good percentage of their revenue. So already today, as an industry, we feel a lot of pain. Our customers feel pain, and we owe it to them to deliver great security end to end. We're also seeing a growing trend in penalties for non-compliance, and this is both around data security but also around privacy. And I won't name names, but we've seen some even recently where different governments, different agencies have fined companies with very significant fines for not protecting data sufficiently and according to standard. So that's something we're all a part of as well. You know, we're standards-based, but I think also coming together in OCP to really look and get a full story of the standards that affect both data centers, well, not just both, data centers, enterprises, and device makers. And that we have a full understanding and a strategy moving forward of how to incorporate these standards and verify that everybody's following the right standards is very important to these efforts. The other thing I'd say for those of you who are CSPs is that this is also a huge motivation to move to the cloud, because the cloud has resources. If we maintain trust, we have resources and abilities that say, the doctor who took out my gallbladder last year, his hospital was hacked, and his data was held, you know, one of those schemes where they ask for a ransom and he paid it. I won't tell you what he paid, I won't name the hospital, but if we can convince all these folks that the cloud is a safe, trusted place, then, you know, we start moving to both a more secure environment, and it's a way to build customer support for the cloud, for a secure cloud. This is a slide that I think many of you are probably more familiar with than I am, but this is just a brief look at all the standards that we have to follow. And I literally just took this from a Seagate slide. Again, Manuel's the expert. He's probably looking at lots of gaps right now. But this is just what I take from what I can look internally as the business strategy guy for this area right now. Along with Vina, who I'll call out, who's sitting right over there, and there's a cost here, but it's a necessary cost. You know, I think we've had some conversations about FIPS. You know, is that really just bureaucracy, or does it improve security? But standards are good, and holding us to standards are good. And collaborating with governments is necessary. And that's very important to us. It's very important to us as an industry. So, you know, one thing we get asked is, well, you know, aren't there some gaps somewhere from the time you have a coder based in the US with a security clearance, writing firmware code to standards which are audited by an IST, all the way through to retiring that drive. And this is another area that's very important to us. You know, we make sure that we, you know, design, I think, completely in the US, is that correct? Not completely in the US, but we do follow standards based on our customer requirements. We're very careful about sourcing, manufacturing, and I would say, and this is, I think, something I can share, is that I've even been on a team where we basically took an MRI of a device and made sure, and high definition photos, and made sure that we could identify every single component that's in that device. That's the level we need to be at. Delivery is always important, but a lot of that comes with making sure that we have, you know, secure firmware that's trusted, that then it's deployed in a trusted manner. In use, a lot of that's around encryption. And then as far as retiring devices, that's something I'm personally passionate about. And the next couple of slides will speak to that. So those two slides are coming up next. This is really a look at what, and this is a Seagate look at what we deliver, but I think it's very similar to other storage providers as well. And that is that we make sure that, for every drive that we ship, that we apply those secure supply chain policies, that we have a storage device root of trust to make sure that we can trust the device, that firmware is updated securely, that we adhere to PKI, that we make sure that any diagnostic ports are not encroachable, and we support storage device secure boot. So today, if you try and boot a device and we don't see the right signature or something, we simply won't boot that device. And that's another one of these areas where we want to make sure that, although great policy, we want to make sure that we're collaborating and that the industry understands, the impacts of that, because you certainly don't want to suddenly have your whole data center down because your drives won't boot, and we understand that. And that's part of what we're love about this OCP effort, is having these discussions. Take it up a level. What we recommend: instant secure erase. That's to make sure that once your device is taken offline, that all data is, we basically take the key off. It's not retrievable. So you have SHA-256 or whatever encryption. Emmanuel, feel free to jump up anytime I make a mistake here.
Yeah, I can definitely jump in here for a second. So the instant secure erase is a cryptographic erase. So it assumes that the data has been encrypted, and if you use an AES 256-bit key with the appropriate encryption mode, or confidentiality mode, which is the formal term for it. The notion here is that you would regenerate a new key on top of the old key and all the data is gone. And with the increasing capacity of storage devices, doing a multi-time override on a hard drive can now turn into weeks of processing time, taking time away from your actual slot that you want to replace the drive in. Overrides with SSDs don't work. End of story. So the really more secure version there is a cryptographic erase for SSDs. There's an alternative. It's called block erase. There is actually an interface for that was specified by T10 and T13 and can be used, but it's still a vendor-dependent implementation. So data can still leak in that specific case. The notion of actually having data that was encrypted being cryptographically erased by changing the encryption key is, in a lot of people's opinions, the fastest and the more secure way of doing that. And the reason I'm saying this is that there are two standards that actually govern media sanitization. One is NIST SP 800-88, and the other one is ISO 27040. Between those two standards, pretty much the whole world is covered, and within those two standards, cryptographic erase is a formal way of data purge. And with that, you can point to those two standards and tell your customers that once the device was decommissioned and the data was cryptographically erased, it was in adherence to those two standards. And so it's, from a TCO perspective, the way to go. It's also, in a lot of cases, from a data security way to go.
Thank you. Yeah, this is why I'm talking and he's not talking, because it would be like a 4-hour talk if we had Manuel up here. But yeah, this is great data. And again, if you want to have, after the talk, we'll be out in the hallway. If you want to have more conversations or more deep dives, I do realize and accept that what we're giving you is a very thin layer of information, that kind of tells the story from end to end. But given the time and the complexity of the topic, this is really what we have to do today. So self-encrypting drives, I think that's speaking to itself. We highly recommend those. And then you have, situations where your devices have to be certified, and that's where FIPS comes in, common criteria, and things like the Trade Agreement Act, which I probably didn't even include in the prior slide on all the long list of standards that we have to follow. This is just, and I've talked to this already, so I won't spend too much time on this slide. But firmware protection is very important. Any piece of code that's loaded on a storage device is privileged code. It's loaded at the kernel level, and we know that we have to be extremely careful about that device. And basically, our company's reputation is at stake, and our customers are obviously, very conscientious of this as well. So we follow all the right standards. Again, lock diagnostic ports, for example, if I go down to like the third section, and making sure that we have authenticated firmware that can't be updated by a third party, that's protected via PKI. This is a slide that I have to show because it's so important to us. But I really think that most people in this room understand the basic principles, because it's the same thing for example, for computer OS firmware. So the next two slides really speak to, again, ICE that Manuel was talking about earlier. So, a lot of what he said simply applies to this slide right here. But maybe for the sake of time, I'll not speak to this slide too long, except to point out that most drives today, millions and millions and millions of drives today, which still have lifespan left in them in many cases, which as a storage company that sells devices isn't really in our benefit to say, but it's true. They end up in the shredder, and that's really basically a perception, I think, more than reality, but it's also the fact that we haven't really set up a system that's trusted in the industry to make sure that cryptographically erasing devices is destroying them and it's manifested. And with that, I'll get to my last slide, because this isn't just a cost issue. It's not just a TCO issue. It's an environmental issue, and in many cases, it's a social justice issue. Because I don't think that these crunch drives, I don't know where they get sent to, but I know a lot of them get sent to overseas, and the way and the impact they have on the people who are having to deal with somewhat toxic material is something that we need to take responsibility for as an industry. And I'm not speaking to anyone, not pointing fingers at anybody, but this is very important to us just as being good citizens and citizens of the planet, that we're able to make sure that there are alternatives that we support to purge data, erase the keys, the ICE question we just talked about, to make sure that that can be attested and verified by the owners of the data, and then stored in a ledger or manifest such that it can be audited. And in a way that is, in my opinion, is more secure than simply throwing a drive into a shredder. I don't know if anyone else in the room has heard of a story of a drive walking out of a data center, but I certainly have. So that's for me a very personal issue that I'd like to see us address as an industry. But it's also backed by Obviously at the bottom you see the number of standards that are involved. And I think it's going to become a growing trend. So I'd really like to push, and other companies are also thinking the same way, towards being able to absolutely erase all the data in a secure manner and either recycle or reuse the devices. With that, this is my last slide. I think do we have a few minutes left for questions? So, two minutes? Okay. Back to one of the earlier statements I made. If you're on the device side or you work with device vendors, get them involved in these efforts. It's important. It opened my eyes as soon as I started getting involved with OCP. A lot of very brilliant people who talk about important things, and you saw earlier what we're up against with this, with the black hat environment generating so much revenue off of us. There's an email here. It's very easy to join. Send an email, you're in. And also, share what you know through your business around customer perceptions, around security, what's needed, where the gaps are, and certainly again, look at certified secure erase as a future pathway towards a more secure way of securing data at end of life. More environmentally friendly, and improve social justice. So with that, I'll wrap up. I think we only have about 1 minute, but please ask any questions you have. Yes?
Does the FIPS certification, is it verifying or validating the ICE, the expert security?
I'm going to pass that one to Manuel.
So under FIPS 140-2, what is verified are several things, but the key aspects are the proper implementation of the crypto algorithms and access to the different interfaces on the device and what the access control mechanisms are and what the authorizations are. The most important thing about ICE is to make sure that your algorithm was properly implemented, so that's covered under FIPS, and that your key has a certain level of entropy. That is partially covered under FIPS. That is covered under FIPS in the sense that the pseudo-random number generator is certified under FIPS, but not necessarily the quality or the bits of entropy that goes into generating the key. That is looked at actually under the common criteria CPP for FDA profile. The common criteria profile was specifically created for full disk encryption, both software and hardware. And they're taking a more specific look at what is the security profile of the device, how keys are being managed, key hierarchies inside the device are being managed, and if keys are actually being removed when they need to be removed, either out of memory or, in the case of a cryptographic erase, actually from media. So I would say the combination of the two, because under the common criteria, a certification of the algorithms is also required. But so the combination of those two will give you a high level of assurance that when you're doing cryptographic erase, the data is gone. That is, the key is gone, and therefore the data is no longer recoverable.
All right, I think we're probably out of time here, but we'll be out here in the hallway if we want to take further questions. And is the next speaker here? All right, please come on up.